Thanks, Colin. Now, former South African President Thabo Mbeki is continuing with his meetings in Zimbabwe today. Yesterday, he met President Emmerson Mnangagwa, and today he's expected to meet other stakeholders.
Problems of this country cannot be solved by one party or two parties or three. They can only be solved by all political players. Let all political actors, let every Zimbabwean who is interested in progress here. We deal with economic challenges, we deal with political, electoral reforms that we have to deal with. Those are the issues that we're discussing. So the discussion is all about how best we get out of the situation where every Zimbabwean is involved in a dialogue process. And I must emphasize, for us in Poland, the issue is not about one or two or three parties. It is about everyone who ought to be involved in trying to get solutions.
President Mbeki has been in this process for a long time. You know that we went into conversations before. So he is one person who has issues of Zimbabwe on the tip of his hand. And I think it would be unfair for him to have spent so much time in Zimbabwe and his legacy does not come through. So he is really legitimately a stakeholder in this process, given all the time that he spent. But the second thing is, I think Zimbabwe needs to move away from insulting their SADC regional people, because we don't live in an island. We are part of a community, and his coming here for us is good in that it says SADC is still engaged in the Zimbabwean issue. And SADC will not be engaged in the Zimbabwean issue if SADC does not have a conversation with every one of the stakeholders in here. As you saw, not only has he seen political parties, he has seen the churches, he has seen civil society. He will be continuing to see. In fact, he told us that he's not going back. He's going to be staying for an extra day or 2 days, depending on what comes through. So I think his coming here is important in that he's not a newcomer. So when you say what is new, there's nothing new. He's merely taking over a conversation and continuing with the conversation which he started with at the beginning. And we on our part are excited. We want to see whether he broadened it to the other SADC sitting leaders, whether he does it on his own. But the important thing is today is historic in that SADC is engaging with the Zimbabwe issue.
All right, so the various voices, some of which have met former President Thabo Mbeki and his visit to Zimbabwe. What might all of this mean, actually? Are there expectations that he might be able to intervene? ZANU-PF earlier on, we spoke to their spokesperson, their South African spokesperson, and he said this isn't a mediation tour. He's just come to visit President Mnangagwa. He hasn't had the opportunity since he came into power, and that's all that's playing out. That was the voice of ZANU-PF, but other stakeholders seem to think more is going on. Well, to help us unpack this a little bit further, I'm now joined by Political Analyst Tino Mambewu. Thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Peter.
What do we make of this visit? The President himself said, I hadn't had a chance to meet President Mnangagwa before, since he came into power, and this is a courtesy call.
I don't think it's a courtesy call in the manner that he may want to portray it as. But I think let's go back to where we are coming from with Mr. Mbeki, President Mbeki. I think you remember that in 2009, he was very critical in the formation of the Government of National Unity in Zimbabwe, where Mr. Morgan Tsvangirai and Mr. Mugabe shook hands and said, we are now starting on a new slate, and we are going to work together for the betterment of the people of Zimbabwe. But unfortunately, that process did not, apart from, for the periodic gains that were done, it did not really bring the result that was intended. At the end of the day, we had a Government of National Unity, which put up, the constitution-making process, which constitution was made and was never adopted, and which still some facets of the constitution up to now have never been adopted into law. And already you can see with the ZANU-PF machinations that are already underway, that they are already beginning to amend the new constitution that has not been fully implemented. So it portrays a scenario whereby I could probably think that Mr. Mbeki is in Zimbabwe to try and give a lifeline to the current dispensation, which is, which has failed dismally.
So, I mean, is there too much of an expectation, perhaps maybe from the other parties and other stakeholders, that his presence might be able to affect some kind of change? I mean, he has done a lot of great work in other parts of the continent over the years. Surely, maybe his voice and his experience might be able to influence Zimbabwe?
Well, I don't want to take that away from President Mbeki. He's a good mediator, he's a good diplomat at the end of the day. But look here, the man that is in charge now is the man that was the former, the former Justice Minister. Mr. Mnangagwa was the Justice Minister during that time of the unit government. And these reforms that we are talking about now yet to be implemented under his Justice Ministry. But he kept on playing hide and seek, cat and mouse with the Constitution up to now. And do you think that now, being president, will he be able to be in a position at least to reform himself out of power? ZANU-PF is on record all the time saying that we are not going to reform ourselves out of power. If anything, Mr. Mbeki should try and meet the Joint Operations Command. He should try and meet the army. If he is not going to meet the army, I do not see anything successful coming out of these talks. You started well yesterday by meeting probably Mr. Mnangagwa, and he met Nelson Chamisa. At the end of the day, I just saw him today meeting some other non-characters, those characters are already in Poland, and I saw him meeting them. That makes us Zimbabweans believe that this is a bogus process. It doesn't carry any water, it holds no weight, it's a fallacy.
We heard one of the voices there say that his presence suggests that SADC is still engaged in Zimbabwe. Is that your interpretation?
You see, SADC has always been toothless. How did they come to a situation whereby we had the government of national unity? Reforms were written down, they were agreed upon, but they were never implemented. 9 years down the line, they want to come and say, probably want to talk of a new charter of talks to try and talk about reforms that we agreed upon, constitution that we agreed upon, and it was never put into effect. What are they talking about? Is it not a matter of redundancy? That we agreed on something 9 years ago, it was never implemented, now we want to start fresh talks. What are we talking about? If Mr. Mbeki wants to see a proper solution in Zimbabwe, he must go and speak to the army. The army is the one that controls the processes. The army is the one that controls ZANU-PF. The army is the one that controls everything that happens in Zimbabwe. So as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Mnangagwa must look at the army and get the army involved, get Mr. Chamisa involved, and get Mr. Mnangagwa involved. At the end of the day, without the army, there's nothing.
When you say the army, are we saying, because Vice President Chiwenga is now part of the executive, or is he still in the army, in your view?
Look, it's a problematic situation. Up to now, we don't even know who fired Mugabe from his position of being president. Some others say he was fired by ZANU-PF. Others said he was fired by the army. At the end of the day, we believe that the only factor that influenced the removal of Mugabe was the army. So if anything, if we don't see the availability of the army in these negotiations, we are not going anywhere. At the end of the day, do we really know whether the vice president still wields power within the army structures? We don't know about that. So at the end of the day, ZANU-PF is the army. Without the army involved, we are not going anywhere. Mr. Mbeki must do his, homework nicely when he looks at the Zimbabwean scenario. Because at the end of the day, we have a process that we normally Zimbabweans would say that it has failed to bring about the key reforms, the security sector reforms, the media reforms. Herald continues haywire. The army continues to beat and hit people in the streets time and again, and nothing happens about it. So at the end of the day, those things, we have already agreed upon them. Why are we going to start talking about them again now this time?
The ZANU-PF spokesperson, Mr. Mandaza, said that, yes, there was a period of austerity and that it's coming to an end now and that we should see a better day coming to Zimbabwe quite soon. How
does a better day come to Zimbabwe when this new dispensation that has come in? I think would you have known that the other one, the Vice President Chiwenga, he just sent his own wife to the courts. I mean, they are alleging that she externalized about $1 million. That was between 2017 and now. And this is the time the new dispensation has been in power. So this issue of austerity or anything is just, to buy time. ZANU-PF is clueless when it comes to running government. They have no idea how to move ahead. They only have ideas on how to steal and, take resources from the people. At the end of the day, we have reached a dead end with ZANU-PF. The question now is, how do we go about it?
So what can happen to unlock a way forward for Zimbabwe? What must SADC do? The African Union? Can South Africa contribute to opening doors?
Firstly, South Africa must admit that ZANU-PF is the impediment to the process of reform in Zimbabwe. If South Africa cannot admit that, and they believe that they are working in partnership with ZANU-PF or with the government to better the lives of the people, then they are wrong. They must be able to look in the bull's eye and consider the military. The military factor is the one that has kept us in circles. If the military decides today that they want something to happen in Zimbabwe properly, it will happen. If the military decides today that reforms should happen, they will happen. If the military decides today that elections will not be rigged, they won't be rigged. But because the military has not been in that position as yet to say, let us save the people, let us save the greater good of Zimbabwe, that is why we are here, because they are benefiting from the current scenario.
So you say ZANU-PF is the impediment, but the majority of Zimbabweans voted for ZANU-PF in the last election.
Where did the majority of Zimbabweans vote for ZANU-PF? We are sitting here because ZANU-PF failed to, we are sitting here because ZANU-PF failed to provide a fair, credible, legitimate election process. At the end of the day, whatever that is born out of an illegitimate process can never be a legitimate result. So it can be argued from today, the next 24 hours, 48 hours, that there was never a legitimate process that led to the elections in Zimbabwe. Therefore, those results are null and void. That is why we are sitting here. If ZANU-PF, for that matter, won the elections, why are they not fixing the economy? Why are they not fixing the economy? If they won the elections, why do they want Chamisa now? Does Chamisa control the keys to the Reserve Bank? He doesn't have anything. He's just a small boy who wakes up, goes to work and does these small things. But because they know they've cheated the most part of the people, the majority of the people have been cheated. That is why they want to try and bring again Mr. Mbeki to go at least and hoodwink Mr. Chamisa into some sort of realizing or acknowledging that Mr. Mnangagwa is the legitimate president. But the people of Zimbabwe know that Mr. Mnangagwa is illegitimate. How do we then proceed with a man who is illegitimate? It's not possible.
It seems that former President Mbeki's hands are quite full. There's a lot
of work to
happen. But thanks so much indeed for coming in, as always, to share your thoughts with us today.
Thank you.